Today, we're going to switch it up a little bit by talking about COVID resources available to farmers in Maryland and some pertinent COVID updates to review with your operational team and with your workers before the season gets started. This series is brought to you by the Maryland Food Safety Network. We're a group of food safety specialists at the University of Maryland, the University of Maryland Extension, the Agricultural Law Education Initiative, and the Maryland Department of Agriculture. My name's Angela Ferelli, and I'm an agent associate at the University of Maryland. I am your host for the series, and I will be your speaker today. Today, we're going to talk about COVID updates for Maryland farmers. These slides are a collaboration of a couple of different groups. We have the Produce Safety Alliance Director, Betsy Bin, put some of this material together, and Wes Klein from Rutgers Cooperative Extension, New Jersey Cooperative Extension, also contributed some content to these slides. So as we all know, dealing with COVID has been a collaborative effort, and these slides are no different. So today we're going to talk about how to work safely while the pandemic is ongoing and what resources related to COVID are available to you to help your farm run as smoothly as possible. So this talk, like most of our work, is a collaborative effort among our food safety colleagues in the Food Safety Network here. We have our representatives from MDA, we have University of Maryland Extension, we have the Agricultural Law Education Initiative, and us at University of Maryland. And if you have a question about this content or any of our content, feel free to reach out to any one of us and we can get that question answered. As always, this program, like all of our programs, are available to everyone regardless of race, color, sex, gender identity or expression, sexual orientation, marital status, age, national origin, political affiliation, physical or mental disability, religion, protected veteran status, genetic information, personal appearance, or any other legally protected class. All right. So to get into it, the pandemic is likely going to be here during this growing season. We definitely know we're going to have to deal with it this growing season, and we know that it's going to affect our markets. We learned many lessons from last year, so this year it's important to apply those lessons as best we can and take the time to tweak what we put in place last year to implement our COVID protective strategy. This season is going to be markedly different from last year. It's going to be markedly different from next year. It's kind of a unique season in terms of COVID protectiveness. So integral to success this season is focusing on communication with your operational staff and your workers and your customers to ensure that everyone's on the same page about what your expectations are when people are on your property or at your markets. So this means on your part, communicating what your farm priorities are, what your COVID protective practices are, and provide resources to your employees so everyone can work safely. Integral to this communication is making sure that everyone has a good understanding of the risk factors for COVID-19 transmission, symptoms, and prevention strategies. And we'll talk a little bit in the presentation about how you can get that across to workers and how you can promote that in your operation. And it's important, the last bullet here, another important thing to communicate is to let everybody know, customers and workers alike, that everyone's actions matter inside the farm and outside the farm, and they can impact the safety of everybody on the farm. So using an approach where we're all in this together, I think is really helpful in setting up your practices, your COVID protective practices, and getting buy-in for people following those COVID protective practices. One thing we're encouraging all farmers to do is go over with their workers the basics of COVID-19 transmission and support workers getting the vaccine. So first, in terms of transmission, I like to use these short 4 bullet points. They were pulled from Maryland.gov, they're pulled from CDC and an FDA statement, just to sort of get everyone on the same page in terms of transmission. Because even, as early as, or as recent as a month ago, we did see an uptick in some concern about COVID being spread from food. So just to keep everybody on the same playing field, it's important to tell your workers and even your customers, the most common spread route of COVID is through close contact. COVID can sometimes be spread by airborne transmission if 2 people are in the same space and there's inadequate ventilation. Touching surfaces is not thought to be a common way that COVID-19 is spread, but it could be possible. That's why enhanced disinfection of high-touch surfaces are important. And then I input this last one because we have seen an uptick in this, as I mentioned. COVID-19 is not known to spread from food or food packaging, okay? So if you have customers that come to you and are concerned about this, feel free to use these references and these resources to provide some education and say, I am doing, the safest thing I can be doing. I'm providing you safe, high quality food, and we don't have to worry as much about COVID from the food I'm providing you here because it's not known to spread from food. Another thing you're going to spend time on this season as a farmer is vaccinations. Vaccinations should now be available to ag workers in all Maryland counties. I know a couple weeks ago they were still kind of working through 1B, but I think all counties should be in 1C now, which is the chunk of people where ag workers kind of are. Encourage your workers to get vaccinated when it's their turn. Again, this is another place where leading by example. So if you get vaccinated, that's going to go a long way to get everybody on board and have everybody kind of trust in the process here. Hand in hand with this, I would encourage you to talk to your workers about vaccinations early and often. And keep in mind that you might have folks who don't have a high level of trust in this coming into it or are a bit wary. So address those reservations with compassion, have an open ear. You might want to have an open space for people to ask you questions. Maybe you can get someone from MDH on the call during a worker meeting just to talk people through, different questions they have about the vaccine. And another thing to do is you could encourage or communicate the benefits of being vaccinated. So a couple of those benefits are this. As of yesterday, around 92 million shots have been administered in the US, and at the current pace of 2.1 million shots a day, we are on track to hopefully think about herd immunity in late summer, so maybe August. Now that was data that was just pulled from yesterday, so we'll have to see if that holds. So the vaccine, if you get it, we know that it significantly reduces the chance of you getting severely sick from COVID. More vaccinations mean that we will end the pandemic faster, and we all want that to happen. We all want to get back to normal. And the side effects from the vaccines have been reported as minimal. So we've got pain at the injection site, headache, and fever as the largest side effects. So you can communicate those sort of benefits to your workers, provide support for them to be able to get vaccinated, which I'll cover more on the next slide. And also communicate to them that even when people are vaccinated, or even like during this time where we're getting people vaccinated, testing is still going to be really important. Quick isolation of those who are feeling symptoms is going to be really important. So your quarantining, your absence and leave policy are going to be really important this season. And communicating to those workers who are vaccinated that they still need to engage in COVID protective procedures. So they still have to mask up, socially distance, and do whatever else you deem is appropriate for your COVID protective practices, because we're not at herd immunity yet. So all that will be important this season. COVID link at maryland.gov has a lot of really good resources to help you talk to your workers about vaccinations. There are resources both in Maryland and nationally at the CDC about vaccine rollout, herd immunity, myths and facts. And these are available, at least in Maryland, they're available in Spanish, Creole, Chinese, Korean, and English. So the action items now in terms of vaccines for farmers is to, 1, communicate information and provide an open forum for people to ask you questions about the vaccine. And 2, work on getting workers pre-registered for appointments if possible. So essential workers should try to pre-register in the county that they work in and the county that they live in. They need to indicate that they are essential agricultural workers. So you as the farmer, write up a cover letter, a couple short sentences that you can give to all your workers. That is a document that says I'm an ag worker that they can bring to their appointment. And you might have to help folks get email addresses, because all these vaccinations are linked to a specific email address, the customer's email address. So if your worker does not have an email address, it might be a good idea during one of your worker meetings this season to get everybody set up with a Gmail or some other sort of email address. And I will also note that we don't yet know how H-2A workers are going to be handled in this. So stay tuned for Maryland Department of Agriculture. You can ask MDA questions and your local health department questions about that if you have H-2A workers who want to get vaccinated. Important actions for you, the employer, to do this year are going to be similar to last year in terms of your COVID protective practices on your farm. So review your operation, think about how you're going to manage COVID risk on the farm this year. That encompasses what your testing strategy is going to be, how you're screening workers every day for symptoms, how you're isolating them and quarantining them if they do have symptoms. During regular work, how to keep distance during working and encourage people to wear masks. If you have folks living on your property, how to do living activities safely. So, eating, sleeping, washing clothes, things like that. Implementing more sanitation and disinfecting cohorts of workers to disinfect those high touch surfaces, and getting any necessary resources that you need for this season, like hand wash stations, which we do have available in a link at the end of the presentation, and it's in the chat now, and thermometers or other things to screen for symptoms. All right, so in Maryland, we have guidance documents on how to perform activities safely, and they encompass activities like on-farm deliveries, agritourism, discussion-based worker training. In terms of day-to-day operation, Maryland also has a nice checklist for safe business practices during COVID. And this checklist encompasses all of these bullet points you see on the slide, what your mask policy is going to be, ensuring that everyone is properly wearing their masks at all times. And if they are taking a break or eating, they need to adhere to social distance policy. Socially distancing workers during work, maybe separating different work tasks or cohorting workers so that you can keep, people separate. Having good hand washing resources and good hand washing activities so that everyone is washing their hands effectively. Enhanced cleaning and disinfection of high touch surfaces. Your leave and absence policy, best practices for working on the farm, so transport and delivery. A good thing here is to opt for 50% capacity in vehicles so people can stay apart. Best practices for worker housing in bunk areas, keeping people distance. With the bunks, you can kind of rearrange the bunks maybe to encourage some distance, having staggered washing and eating times, and making sure that the housing has proper ventilation in it. Early isolation of sick workers, contact tracing and support for sick workers, and good signage to encourage all of the good practices that you have in place. So all of these are going to be important this season as well. In terms of day-to-day work, you can consider cohorting workers. This is a good practice to kind of keep people separate, and also it's a good COVID risk reduction strategy. So create groups of people, either by if they are living together or by the type of work that they do together. So if you have to do some contact tracing, it's less kind of questions that you have to answer. If an exposure happens, you can also cohort people to kind of do COVID risk reduction strategies here. So you can group together people who are a positive, group together people who might have been exposed, and then the third tier is people who weren't exposed. So kind of use these tools to your benefit if this will work for you, cohorting workers to reduce risk in terms of COVID spread, and just increase the efficiency of day-to-day work during the pandemic. Just wanted to go over a couple of return to work policies. You might be very familiar with these, but review your return to work policies if workers do get sick from COVID. More information on this on the web. More information on this is on the websites that I mentioned earlier. If someone tests positive and is experiencing symptoms, remember they can stop isolating and return to work after no fever for 3 days and symptoms have improved and 10 days have passed after symptoms first appeared, or if you've received 2 negative tests. If someone tested positive and is asymptomatic, they can stop isolating and return to work after 10 days. And there are possible exceptions for this if a group of positive asymptomatic people work together and they're all masked up and they can be separated. So just re-review your return to work policies and how you're dealing with sick workers before the season gets started this year to see if you need to tweak anything. All right, kind of moving into some resources that we have for you. So hand washing is one of our best defense against germs in general. And it's a good way to encourage good hygienic practices. When you have hand wash stations on the farm, place them strategically throughout the farm. So at the entrance of the work area, or if you have customers on the farm, placing hand washing at the entrance of customer areas is a really good strategy to kind of encourage people to wash their hands before they engage in activities on your farm. Remember, if you have a hand wash station, it will be someone's job to make sure that it's stocked with all the necessary supplies. And you got soap, single-use paper towels, running water, and a place to store the gray water. In addition to hand washing, you can also provide hand sanitizer. Remember, the hand sanitizer has to be at least 60% alcohol, and you can have this in various locations, but this is not a substitute for hand washing, as we all learned last year. And it is a best practice, if you can, to schedule hand washing breaks for your workers every hour, because within an hour, how many things do you think you touch in an hour? I can't even tell you how many things I probably touch in an hour. So having a good measured time interval where we wash our hands can really up the good hygiene on a farm. And we have hand wash stations that you can request at the link at the end or in the chat already. Maryland created a discussion-based worker training to go over with your workers in terms of COVID. I think this is a pretty nice training because it's discussion-based and because it has a script. So it encompasses a lot of what we're talking about today in a question and answer format. And you could use this kind of as a gateway for talking about vaccinations this year to get people comfortable asking you questions and just talking about how COVID is being handled on your farm. So the basic things that this document covers are, basic definitions of COVID, how it spreads, symptoms, and prevention. And then you can go into specifics of how you're working to keep workers safe on the farm and keep customers safe on the farm. So I encourage you to take a look at this. If you didn't use this last year, maybe this year you can work it into worker onboarding or one of your worker meetings in the beginning and the middle of the season, just to keep everybody on their toes in terms of, COVID. Maryland also has a guidance for various customer interfacing, whether if that means you have customers coming on the farm to pick up stuff, if you have a farmer's market booth, or if you're running a pick your own. So there's some guidance for a couple of different things that you might be engaging in. We'll go over a couple of specific items to keep in mind this year in the next couple slides, but I encourage you to reread through this guidance and see if there's anything you need to tweak for this year. Additionally, reach out to your local health departments before starting any planned activities this year, because some local health departments have different restrictions or are more restrictive than what the state guidance is. So there are local health department numbers at this link here, and I'm going to provide these slides in PDF form to everyone on the call in the post-meeting notes, so you'll have all of these links. Did we have something in the chat? Okay. Yes, you can request a hand washing station. Yes, I will put the Google form in the chat again when I can. So thank you. Thank you for your interest. All right, in general, to all of these customer interfacing guidance documents, you're gonna find some common threads. The common threads are, keeping people separate, separating activities if possible, basic hygiene, encouraging basic hygiene, and masking, right? So a couple of things that I pulled out that don't really fit into the next slides are, continue to utilize either call ahead shopping, curbside pickup, online shopping platforms if that's available to you and if that works for what you're your setup is. Minimize customer touching product, because, you know, the more that we touch, the more we may contaminate. This is just a basic hygiene thing. You know, so if you have a pick your own, encourage people at the front to just pick what they're going to buy. If you have a farmer's market booth, you can encourage shoppers to shop with their eyes and not with their hands this season. Separate customer activities and interaction from the rest of the farm. So if you have farm deliveries and pickups, you know, you might have done this last year, but if you did not, you can separate where the customer interacts with different people and have that be physically separate from activities or packing that goes on the farm. And similarly, it's a good idea to have any workers who are dealing with customers kind of separate from workers who are dealing with the activities on the rest of the farm. So if workers are dealing with customers and then also working on the farm or packing things, you know, it's a good idea to train them to wash their hands and maybe change their mask, or especially, you know, definitely wash their hands between working with customers and going back out to farm activities. Make sure that they're read up on your mask policies and they're wearing their mask correctly, things like that. Integral to all of these customer interfacing documents is information about mask wearing, and there's additional really good information, tips and tricks about your mask policy, how to devise a good mask policy, and what your options are for enforcement if you want to enforce. There's some really good information at the below link. This is from Vermont agricultural lawyers. This was put out in late January. So it goes over a lot of different resources that you have at your disposal as a farm operator. But I would encourage you to have your mask policy clearly posted wherever you can post it, so no one's surprised on what your mask policy is, because we know that masks are one of the best defense against viral transmission. Have masks available for customers if they're coming onto your farm, or even for workers, right? So having a cache of masks is a good idea, just in case someone forgot that day. You can give them a mask. Make a plan for servicing people who can't wear a mask due to a disability. So, and this can also kind of double dip for people who are coming on your farm who don't want to wear a mask for other reasons. You can encourage them to still engage in farm activities, but more separate from everybody else. So you can have them do a curbside pickup or an online pre-order, something like that. But just definitely make sure that all your workers are trained on what your mask policy is and how or when you want them to enforce it. So enforcement can be de-escalation, it can be sort of distraction, or it could be a combination of those things. I remember we talked with a couple of farmers markets who had de-escalation teams come in and train everybody at the farmers market on different, you know, phrases and sort of things to say to folks who came in a little hot about mask wearing. So just think about how you want to handle this. And again, if you present a united front and encourage everyone we're all in this together sort of way, I think it goes a long way. And there are mask signs that you can get from us that you can post at your customer interfacing, or either wherever your workers are, to encourage proper mask wearing. So that means over the nose and mouth, right? That also means when you touch your mask, you should wash your hands, things like that. Keeping people spaced apart is also a great strategy to reduce COVID risk. We have printed reusable rubber floor mats that encourage 6-foot distance that you can put up in your customer area or in your worker area to encourage that physical separation. If you have customers interfacing on your farm, try to discourage groups of 10 or more from kind of congregating together. And you can do that either by setting up unidirectional sort of flow of customers. That works kind of well, especially for pick your owns. And you can use the distance markers to promote that unidirectional flow. You can also kind of do that by keeping things separate, as we talked about before. You know, in this example, maybe you have a booth and you have one worker who just works with the money and another worker who just works with the produce and packs the produce for the customer. So you can achieve this in a couple of different ways. For those folks with farmers market booths, we've created a holistic checklist for food safety and COVID protective measures that you can use this season. It has some items that are geared towards market managers, so like high level organization items, but you can just cross those off and kind of focus on the other action-based activities for vendors. And it has some good information on both activities to implement at your market booth and information to communicate to whatever workers you're having work at your market booth this season. Here is a draft of the signage that we have, or one of the signs that we have for customers. So you can see here the tagline is "Keep Farmers Safe and Growing." So it gives this "we're all in this together" sort of vibe, and it has the 4 tenets that we thought were really important to let every customer know, and also workers as well. So making sure we're wearing our mask properly, keeping our distance, washing our hands. So general, you know, general hygiene here, and minimizing touch. So we've got this is a draft version of what will be available. All of these icons are just sketch icons at this point, but this is kind of what you're going to be getting if you get the signage for customers. And then we have another one that is specifically about masks. It's 3 sort of icons that talk about proper mask wearing. So that's available at the Google Doc at the end of the presentation. All right. So this season, as I said at the top of the presentation, it's going to be in flux. It's different than last season. It's going to be different than 2022. I think important for the farm operators on the call is to find your trusted sources of information and follow those trusted sources, and just kind of keep plugged in this season, because updates are going to be coming every 2 weeks, you know, maybe even at higher intervals as we get kind of rolling with vaccinations. So you can sign up for email updates. I think for me, I like email updates because it's something kind of passive that just gives information to me, and I don't have to go out and search for it. So the CDC has a good one. I think the FDA has other good ones as well. And we'll talk about other ones as the slides go on. But so yeah, just keep plugged into the information as it comes out. Remember that executive orders are still in effect in Maryland, and some counties have more restrictions than those from the governor's executive orders. So another plug to check with your county agencies. You might want to get like email updates from them if you can, to follow when their restrictions are changing and such like this. And kind of hand in hand with this, you're following the updates. It's probably also a good idea to install like a 15-minute debrief of all those updates that you're getting. Maybe it's bi-weekly, maybe it's once a month with your workers, just so that everybody's on the same page and we kind of all know how we're working through this as the season goes on. Here's another good source of information if you want to stay plugged in, or for staying plugged in. The Institute for Food Safety at Cornell has a very comprehensive page on COVID. It's at this link here. And some particular things in the Cornell page are training materials for produce farm and packing house workers. So you can have your workers go through this for COVID training. And we also, or not we, sorry, Cornell also has COVID boosters every other week, which are short videos kind of to summarize what's been going on with COVID and update everybody. So you can plug into those as well. In terms of resources, other things that are at your disposal, one other really good site is the site that North Carolina State University came up with at foodcove.net. This site has all of those really great infographics that you've been seeing. If you've seen any infographics, they did a lot of really good work in the beginning of this pandemic, and they've been updating it to have infographics for your workers, for things that happen on farm, for things that happen at the point of sale, for restaurants. It has a lot of COVID signage and infographics for kind of the whole farm to fork continuum in terms of safety in agriculture. Here's just a snippet of the different things they have. You can see that it is, you know, some of them are more fact sheet based with more words. Some of them are more pictorial. We've got different languages on here, so you can peruse through that site and kind of see if anything would work specifically for you in terms of, you know, getting your point across the season or helping you implement whatever policies you want to implement for COVID protectiveness. One really good one that I wanted to pull out and what we'll end on today is this infographic about cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. And that's because we had a couple of questions on this as COVID was getting on. So I thought it would be good to discuss with those on the call today. This is a good thing to add to your worker training and also to consider for you as you're devising your disinfection regimes. So disinfection, remember, is a higher level of kill on bacteria and viruses than sanitizing. So this means it could either mean you're using a different product than what you use for sanitizing, or you could be using the same product that you use for sanitizing, but at higher concentrations and at a different procedure. So it's really important to read the product label of what you want to use for disinfecting to check if your product is labeled for disinfection on the surface that you want to disinfect. So is it labeled for disinfecting on food contact surfaces, or is it labeled for disinfecting on just hard non-porous surfaces like doorknobs, right? So check to see if your product is labeled for what you're using it for, make sure that it is, and take note on the concentrations that you need to use to achieve disinfections. They're going to be higher than sanitizing concentrations, most likely. The contact time of the chemical with the surface might be longer, and you may or may not have to implement a final rinse after you apply the disinfectant. So just read that label thoroughly, and a good tool to kind of help you on this if you've got some questions about what product to use. EPA came up with this online tool that you can filter chemicals by different questions or different sort of queries that you have. So you can filter disinfectants that are effective against COVID-19 for hard non-porous surfaces, for food contact surfaces that don't require a rinse when you use it, or for food contact surfaces that do require a rinse, or if you've got porous surfaces. And so this is, I really liked finding this tool, and I think it's important because, you might have a sanitizer that you're already using in your operation, and to elevate it to the level of disinfectant, you're going to have to use it differently, right? So you might have a liquid sanitizer and disinfectant. This is, I think this is proxyacetic acid based, right? This is labeled for food contact surfaces, doesn't need a rinse. However, if you've got sodium hypochlorite from Clorox and you want to use it as a disinfectant, this is okay for food contact surfaces, but when you use it as a disinfectant, it does require a rinse, and it has, there are going to be other sort of procedure notes involved with using these items as a disinfectant. So just keep that in mind. Use the tools available to you to make sure that we're all on, you're using the right product for the appropriate surface. All right. So I'm going to end on this slide, just a summary of the COVID resources available for Maryland farmers this year. We got hand wash stations are available, distance markers. We have wash your produce signs for workers, just general hygiene stuff in English and Spanish. We have mask signage. We have COVID signage for customers. They're all available here. I will try to copy and paste the link back into the chat. But in summary, as I've said a couple of times in this presentation, the season is going to be unique. It's going to evolve from the start to the end. Set up your policies for COVID protectiveness, have open communication with your workers, follow trusted sources, and utilize the resources available to you to farm safely and effectively this season. And with that, I will take any questions that you may have.